Hello all, Rick here with an additional index video from the Expanse universe. The state of the belt and its colonies changes vastly over the times with the Expanse, so for the sake of brevity and not rehashing the whole plot, I will be focusing on its status nearer the beginning of the series, only touching on some key elements where they relate later on to their society and form of governance. In the Expanse, there is a deliberate attempt to shy away from an exact date of their setting, but it is at least set in the 24th century, probably around the 50s, according to common fan speculation and references in other media surrounding the franchise. For this video, however, I will be going with the dating system of BXT to give a timeline of events. Around 129 BXT, when the colony of Mars had been established and Earth was looking to retain its hold over that colony, Solomon Epstein accidentally invents the Epstein drive, a method of faster interplanetary travel within the solar system. Although he died on the flight, his technology was recovered by his wife and sold to Mars, which then traded it to Earth to secure its independence. With both Earth and Mars now having faster and more efficient methods of travelling, the solar system was opened up to them for colonisation, and with it came the demand for resources. So it was that asteroid mining became more commonplace, and the belt was the prime territory for workers seeking to supply the two worlds of Sol. In time, this working class, charged with the hazardous task of mining, hauling and breaking rocks, settled some of the larger ones and formed their own culture, their descendants becoming the Belters. Immediately we can see the beginnings of issues for the Belters, because they were working class and performed a dangerous job, all while the people of the two planets were living in comfort and benefiting from the resources that the belt provided. This was only made worse with time. As the community of the Belters grew, they became more distinct and isolated from the others, referring to them collectively as Inners. Their own language developed based on those they brought with them, and their own culturally significant styles and activities were drawn from the shared experiences of the hardships of living in such a barren place. Not only were the asteroids home to the Belters, but many of the moons and outer planets became synonymous with the term. Although this paints a uniform picture of Inners and Belters, just as Mars and Earth are different cultures, the Belters themselves are spread across multiple factions and groups, with pretty much every station or outpost answering to its own overseer and each crew having a captain. There have been efforts to gather these separate factions, colonies and crews, and the most notable of these movements was the Outer Planets Alliance, or OPA, that began as a formal attempt at a workers' union of the Belters, allying them together to push back against the exploitative governments of Mars and Earth. Over time it evolved into a flag under which the differing groups of Belters could rally and solidify their individuality as a Belter, but with the diasporic nature of their organisations, the OPA came to embody different things for different people. Unfortunately, some opted to respond to the tight control of the Inners through violence, and became extremists, despite the official stance of the OPA being non-violent. These actions did much to further escalate the tension between them. Essentially, while the OPA gave some unity and structure to the Belters, the myriad of different leaders interpreted and acted in their own interests, for good or ill. So when people describe the OPA as both a group for advocating rights and a terrorist organisation, it really depends on which faction you are dealing with, a distinction not every Inner nor Belter makes. Generally, Ceres is considered the capital of the belt, but this is simply because it is the largest colony and most populated outside of the inner planets, but this is not official from what I can gather. The station has a gravity of 0.3 g from an inflicted rotation, and is mostly underground tunnels inhabited by 6 million people, with further traffic of another million. Initially the planetoid was a protectorate of Earth, with the UN security managing affairs, However, Mars also has its hooks in the station, exporting most of its ice water to aid its own terraforming efforts. This has left Ceres at the whims of imports and trade from the Inners, and in a constant state of water rationing. Just one of many grievances that the Belters have attributed to the inner worlds, although even on Ceres the cost of living can vary significantly and there are differing levels of comfort to be found. Belter technology is naturally derived from the same gear as Earth, but it is often in a far more run-down state, from ships to water reclamation facilities. This is generally a symptom of neglect imposed upon the Belt by the Inners and has forced them to make do with what they have, often jury-rigging, repairing, or stealing what they need just to keep going, as seen most prominently in their ships. The Belters generally have a distinctive look to them, being taller and gaunter than most regular-bodied humans, although this is a generalisation. This stems from the low-gravity environments that they grew in as their bones elongated but became far more brittle. Likewise, their muscles are only adapted for such microgravity worlds as is the rest of their body, and they find living in Earth normal gravity exhausting, if not dangerous. There are ways to offset this loss of mass, that being quite simply exercise to build that muscle, as well as supplements and steroid use to allow for adaptation. The level of microgravity acclimatization varies as much as there are locations in the Belt, with some being able to endure 1G quite well, while others cannot even stand. It is common and generally expected for Belters to adorn themselves with tattoo markings of various symbolic and individual value. The most commonly seen tattoos, however, are the ring around the neck design, which is a stylized geometric pattern. This is done to resemble the seal of a spacesuit helmet, as in the early days of Belter colonization, faulty suits were common. This led to the seals to heat up and even burn the wearer, leaving scars on the neck, which younger Belters emulate through the tattoos as a sign of respect and a nod to the troubles of Belters that came before. Aside from these, the tattoos are as varied as any other humans, denoting affiliation, significance, or simply personal taste. Their spoken language is known as Belter Creole or Lang Belta, and is derived from the original languages of the Belt settlers as phrases and words which were mingled. In real life, its origins are a mixture of English, Chinese, Persian and Hebrew languages, as well as many of the words simply being abbreviated or reverting them into a shared phonetic slang. The most obvious examples being the words Belta for Belter and Inya for inner. This has led to the emergence of a unique accent to accompany it, which again completely varies depending on where in the Belter person originates. Those from metropolitan hubs, such as Ceres, have a less pronounced accent, while those who spend most of their time on remote ships may have a stronger one. Another addition to this language is the addition of hand signs and gestures that are unique to the Belters. These evolved from the need to communicate in space, often in periods where communication signals had failed or were not warranted. Such necessity drilled these motions into the Belters, who now share them alongside their parlance. These distinctions of culture and appearance have made it easy to discern and alienate Belters further from the inner-dwelling humans, and led to the continuation of prejudices. From the Belters' side, many of their resources are stripped and fed towards the inner planets, while they eke out a living on the harsh colonies and shipboard life. They view the Inners as soft, uncaring and selfish, growing complacent of the abundance of wealth they possess and throwing scraps to the Belt. For the Inners' part, they see the Belters as responsible for getting their own act together and treat the acts of extremism from a few factions to justify their attitude of indifference or resentment. Unfortunately, while such views are also accompanied by softer voices of compassion, both sides have cause to have these opinions. The concerns of the Belters are rarely met by the Inners, and all too often conflict erupts between the sides, alienating them further. The OPA was an attempt to provide a united government for the Belters, something for the other powers to negotiate with, but the fact that the right hand never knows what the left hand is doing breaks that idea pretty quickly. what the belt needs is a unifying voice for all who live there, and one of the ways to stabilise it is for a leader to rise up among them. However, the belt is going to be reliant on trade with the planets even if it goes independent, so the spirit of cooperation needs to be maintained. But that is easier said than done, because at the end of the day, Belters are just humans too, and prone to all the same flaws. Thanks for watching this index on the Belters. As this was a one-off, the next one will be on the voted on topic and will continue as normal after that. Thank you for watching this one, and let me know if you want me to cover more of the Expanse lore, despite the series' current endpoint. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time for another lore video. Goodbye.